What's going on, guys? MrBallen here. Earlier I had been saying you probably know me from TikTok. But the reality is the majority of people that are watching this video, or who have watched my other videos, are actually just from YouTube, which is really cool to feel like YouTube is promoting some of my videos. I think I'm incredibly lucky to have that be happening. I'm incredibly lucky to have this page growing as quickly as it is, and I'm incredibly lucky to have you paying attention, even if it's just for a few minutes. So, thank you for tuning in. A little bit about me, I am a former Navy SEAL. I got medically retired at the end of 2017. I initially started making content that was pretty much exclusively about being a Navy SEAL in my experiences. But then when I got on TikTok at the end of 2019, early 2020, I kind of just completely pivoted and started sharing stories that I was just fundamentally interested in. Is scary stories, true crime, mysteries, that type of content, purely because I enjoy it. I was very fortunate that it took off on TikTok, and here I am on YouTube, kind of trying to do the same thing, sharing content about, darker but really interesting, compelling stories. It's just something I'm passionate about, and I'm really happy that I'm starting to grow a platform that is based on that, cause I would love to do this indefinitely. So today, I'm gonna be covering a very famous haunting, but before I get into any details about it, I want to be upfront with the people watching this video. This video and my channel in general are not designed to be, an attempt at convincing people that the paranormal is real or that ghosts are real, but rather I want to cover stories that are just plain interesting. And I like covering things that are the darker variety. True crime, certainly unsolved mysteries falls into that. I love that genre, the kind of dark, mysterious genre. And so this story really interests me because there's lots of photo evidence. There's multiple witnesses that kind of corroborate, not necessarily that ghosts are real, but rather that the events that lead to people speculating it was a haunting. There are people that corroborate the details, meaning the story is cohesive. That the actors in the story, basically corroborate one another. And so it leads us down a path to getting to the end of the story and we're like, well, what the hell happened? Because if it's not a haunting, what was it? Because a bunch of things happen that are pretty difficult to explain. So, the too long didn't read version of this story is, you have a single mom who moves into a home with her kids, and she starts hearing noises in the walls, in the attic. She can't make sense of it. She has friends and the babysitter that are at the house that also hear it. Her ex-husband starts to experience it. You have all these people experiencing these weird phenomena happening in the house. And then, through a weird series of events that involves priests, landlords, and child protective services, they have a paranormal investigator come over with camera equipment and all that. They come in the house, and they end up documenting quite a bit of startling imagery and footage that only lends credibility to the fact that this actually might be a real haunting. So, that's the story in a nutshell. Let's dive in. In 1989, a 23-year-old woman named Jackie Hernandez has just broken up with her husband. It was an amicable separation. They just weren't on good terms. They decided it's time to get a divorce, but we will, happily co-parent our two kids together. So it's an amicable breakup. Jackie moves into a small, modest home in San Pedro, California, with the kids. And she's working a ton. She's a student at night, she's working multiple jobs. It's a very hard, stressful time. But she's doing her best to support her family and kind of land on her feet. So, about a month after living in this house, Jackie comes home from a long day at school and work, and she sits down. Kids are asleep, and she puts on the TV, and she's just trying to decompress. And as she's sitting there, she starts to hear what sounds like little pebbles falling down inside of the walls. So She mutes the TV and she's listening, and it's just periodically little pebbles are falling down the wall. She goes up and she's listening her with her ear against the wall, and she's thinking to herself, there's gotta be, a mouse or some critter up in my attic, unfortunately, that's kicking some pebbles into a gap in the wall. And as she's listening, she thinks she hears what sounds like footsteps in the attic. And so it startles her. Now she's really paying close attention to the attic. She doesn't hear it again. This is the first time she's heard anything like this. So she kind of did the very human sort of rationalizing what she just heard, and assumed she was just hearing things in the attic. It's just some critter. I'll deal with it later. So, a couple days later, Jackie has her friend Susan over to just hang out with her at her house. The kids are asleep and they're relaxing, talking, sitting on the couch, and as they're sitting there, they hear a loud bang in the kitchen. It sounded like something had fallen. And so, at this point, Jackie had mentioned to Susan this weird, hey, I think I got an animal up in the attic, because I heard some rocks falling through the walls. But the funny thing was I could have sworn I heard footsteps up there. But, probably just my mind playing tricks on me. So Susan is keyed in that maybe there's a little bit of weirdness happening in the house. So, when they hear the sound in the kitchen, it's like they both instantly go to, okay, what's happening here? Is this more to do with the footsteps in the attic, or is there a rational explanation? So they're on guard. They walk into the kitchen, and they find a picture that was hanging on the wall that had fallen. Which, honestly, that's not a cause for a ghost is in the house. But it was held up by a couple of nails, and the nails, were removed from the picture frame and were standing on their head, point up, next to the image. Next to the picture. So imagine, if a picture falls, are all the nails going to come out and land perfectly on their head right next to it? No, it's almost impossible. But, sure enough, that happened. So Susan and Jackie are staring at the picture, they're staring at the nails, and they have no idea what to make of it. Susan was a little bit more eager to connect it to these footsteps in the attic, but she also did not want to, frighten her friend, cause she knows she's living alone. And so, they kind of talked a little bit about it, and maybe they both wanted to have that discussion about what's happening in the house, but they both kind of decided, without saying anything, that we're gonna kind of avoid this topic. And so, they put the picture away, the nails away. Susan actually decides to just leave, cause she's a little bit freaked out. And so she's gone. The next night, Susan actually brings over a new babysitter. It's the 16-year-old girl, named Tina. And so I guess, Jackie wanted a little bit of time to leave the house. She thought that she was kind of losing her mind with all the stress of work and school. And so Tina comes over. Jackie had not told Tina anything about what was going on in the house. It was just like, hey, take care of the kids. I'll see you in a little bit. She's sitting on the couch, Tina the babysitter, and she just, you know what? I'm gonna go just check on the kids. I got a weird feeling to make sure they're okay in their bedrooms. And as soon as she goes to push the door opens, which she remembers in an interview saying it was strange that was strange. Before I actually made contact with the door swung open. But I didn't think anything of it. I walked in, the sun is just fine. So I walked back out and I shut the door. But as soon as I shut it, I turned around and it was starting to open again. And she describes thinking that, I guess, the house must be, not level or something. Jackie comes home and Tina tells her about the door, and I think that Tina, on some level, was hoping that Jackie, being the adult, would, hear what she was saying and have just a totally rational explanation for what was going on. My door. The door always does that, something like that. But Tina was shocked when she told her this, and Jackie reacted visibly. like she was concerned. And Tina's like keying in on it, and she was like, I mean, do you know why this could happen? Why the door would be kind of opening on its own? And Jackie just said, honestly, there's been a couple of weird things that have happened. And so they talked about it a little bit, but ultimately, they both just decided, you know what? I think that we're connecting things that don't need to be connected. It's just a couple of strange occurrences. So Tina leaves, Jackie goes to bed, and they don't think about it. So the next day, Jackie has Tina come back over because she needs some more help with the kids. And so, as they're standing in the kitchen, Jackie's describing to Tina what she needs to do that night, when to feed the kids, what time to put them to bed. Tina just kind of stops paying attention to Jackie and looks up at the corner of the kitchen. And so in the back corner of the kitchen, Tina's looking and she says, did you put in a new light in the corner of your kitchen? And Jackie looks too, and she's like, whoa, what is that? And it looks like there's this, light bulb, kind of a weird looking light bulb in the corner of the kitchen on the ceiling, which there wasn't a light bulb over there. And Jackie says as much, and they're looking at it, and then it begins to move, not towards them, just it was just kind of moving around, like an orb of light that was kind of moving around. And now, had Jackie and Tina relayed that particular experience, almost everybody, or virtually everyone, would be like, yeah, okay, you saw a floating light in your kitchen. Well, they took a picture of it because it didn't go away. So they went and got a camera and they took this picture all. And so you can see there's, this blob of light, that was in their kitchen. Between the pebbles in the wall, the footsteps in the attic, the falling picture with the nails standing on their head, with, Tina saying the door wouldn't shut, and now this orb of light. Now Jackie has officially kind of gone from I'm gonna play this rational and not worry about it to I have no idea what's wrong, and I can't explain this. I can't tell people this without them thinking I'm crazy. With the exception of Susan, and Tina, because their kids were too young to know what was going on, there's no one that she felt comfortable sharing her anxieties and fear about what was happening. Because how do you, a skeptical, rational person, go to for example, the police and say, hey, there's nothing in my attic. But I believe there's someone walking around my attic and kicking pebbles into my walls and knocking pictures off the wall and taking the nails out the wall and standing them on the head. They're gonna say that, well, are you doing this? Are your kids doing this? And so the only person that Jackie finally felt comfortable telling was her ex-husband, cause they were still amicable. She has all come over and she finally says to him, I have a lot of weird things happening. She showed him the picture of the lights in the kitchen. She describes everything that happened in the house. And Dal would say that, in a way, he thought that this was just kind of an act to maybe draw attention to the fact that she was lonely and that she missed him. He wasn't sure if that's what it was, but he definitely was not ready to believe in anything she was saying. He just kind of felt bad for the position she was in. So he listens and he says, look, kind of almost playing along with her, he's like, let's just call it out. If there's something happening in your house, we should call it out. And so he stands up and she's saying, no, don't do that. Don't do that. And he goes, whoever's here, show yourself. And they're looking around, nothing. And I think in a way, Jackie was disappointed that there wasn't, footsteps in the attic right then and there, but there was nothing. And so all kind of does the see, there's nothing to worry about here. Just stop worrying about it. So he leaves and, Jackie's disappointed but not shocked. And she goes to put something away in the closet. This is immediately after he's left, and she opens this closet, and inside the closet, on every wall inside the closet, on the back of the door was written L in red, and the L in blue. Hello all over the world. And it had not been there before, and what she believes was a response to the challenge by Ellen. So at this point, if she had money, She said she would have left, but she didn't. She didn't have the resources to move. And so she's just kind of trapped. And she's expressing her concerns and her anxiety to her friend Susan. And the two of them are actually out for a walk in their neighborhood, and she's telling Susan how scared she is and, like, what do I even do? And it just so happens that the landlord, did something weird happen with the landlord after this, or did she finally find a way out of that house? It sounds like things were escalating pretty quickly. Jackie's landlord was walking down the street at the same time, and they bump into each other. They have some pleasantries, and Susan just kind of, without even asking Jackie's permission, says to the landlord, "Hey, there's some weird stuff happening in her house." She doesn't want to tell anyone cause she thinks people will think she's crazy. And so they go into describing to the landlord all the strange happenings in the house, the lights that they got a picture of, the pebbles, all the footsteps, all of it. And the landlord is very religious and is very concerned and says, "Would you allow me to have the priests come to your house and check your house out?" And Jackie she is a religious person, but to be honest, was a little skeptical at the idea of introducing religion to what was going on. I think that for her, she just wanted it to go away. But then again, she had nowhere to turn, and so she was like, okay. Yeah, we'll have the priests come over and check it out. So the next day, these two priests show up to her house. And Jackie's house was very much in disarray. She had two young kids, she was working multiple jobs, doing school late, and she had all this weirdness happening in her house. And so when they showed up, her house was a total mess. Her kids are crying. It's a madhouse. And ultimately, what happened from this visit is the priests walked around, offered to bless her children. But really they didn't have any sort of conclusion. And then they leave and Jackie was like, well, that didn't really do anything for me. But okay. The next day, she gets a visit from Child Protective Services because the priests had actually filed a complaint saying that this was all a hallucination by an incompetent mother. This notion that the house was haunted, combined with when they showed up, the house was a total mess, they just said, I don't think the kids are safe. And so Child Protective Services gets called, who basically threatened Jackie to clean it up. Literally clean up your house. But we're gonna be checking in on you to make sure you're a fit mother. And so this is a huge blow. Because now Jackie is seeing what happens when you bring up that your house is haunted, right? That this is what can happen. And so now, she is not prepared to share this with anybody. So over the next couple weeks, Jackie brings her kids into the living room and they all start sleeping in the same room. She's increasingly paranoid. She's overworked and she's not sleeping enough, and she's just kind of really spiraling. And Susan, who's her friend, is really taking is noticing this. And she also knows the sensitivity of being able to really share this with, authority because she knows what the Child Protective Services called did, and she knows that Jackie is really afraid to share the story with anyone. But she goes over and she tells her, you have to call a paranormal investigator. It is probably the only group of people that, if you reach out to them with a story, they're not going to treat you like they're crazy. And if nothing else, that is a reason to call them, even if what they provide is worthless to you, that it doesn't accomplish anything. They're at least a group of people that are going to take you seriously. And so finally, Jackie just says, okay, let's do it. So a couple days go by, and this team shows up at their house, this paranormal investigator team. They have cameras and recorders. They are in it to try to capture footage. And even though they were ready to listen to Jackie and had obviously taken her seriously enough that they had shown up at her house, they were fairly skeptical. They, by their own admission afterwards, after this whole case had happened, they had said that they had covered over 3,000 cases prior to this, and brought the recording equipment and all that, had never once found anything usable, that would even hint at the existence of ghosts or the paranormal. And so you could say that they were empathetic to people that had these experiences, but usually either there was nothing going on, or they found a rational explanation for whatever the person was claiming to happen. They didn't have any paranormal footage, so they're interviewing Jackie on camera. The 3 investigators that are there, they're kind of asking her some questions about what's going on and filming it. And, Jackie had actually invited her ex-husband, Al, to be there with the kids. So he's in the other room with the kids, and they're interviewing her. And then the power goes out, which, it sounds pretty cliche-end, and I get that, but the power goes off, and then the power comes back on. And it visibly shakes Jackie. She had been living in this house with all these weird occurrences, and it was like she had this feeling that something bad was going to happen. And so she starts acting really scared, and she says, "You know, I am telling you, there's something going on with the attic." And so they kind of stop the interview and they're like, "All right, let's just go have a look at the attic." We'll go look. There won't be anything there. We'll come back down and we'll chat with her some more. And so, one of the 3 investigators gets a ladder and crawls through this little crawl space into the attic. And so he goes up. And so while he's doing that, Al, who's, in the other room with the kids, he's wide awake, laying with his son. He's just like waiting. He's not really expecting anything to happen. And as he's laying there, he could have sworn he heard someone whisper in his ear, "Tell them to get the hell out of here." And he has an interview he does where he describes this moment, and you can tell that Al is as skeptical as they come. And he's like, "I just don't know how to explain it. I heard it clear as day. And right after I heard it, I heard a scream from the attic." The guy, the photographer who had gone up into the attic, he was alone up there, and he had brought his expensive camera, and he comes running downstairs, or jumps through the hole and practically falls out of the attic. And he tells them, "Something grabbed my camera." There's no one up there, but something grabbed my camera. And his heart's racing. His face is pale, and the other investigators, they're starting to feel like, what's going on? Al comes bursting out of the room and he's like, "What's going on?" And the photographer is like, "My camera." And he goes from being scared of what happened to now being like, "That's my livelihood. I need to get that camera back." So he goes back up into the attic to retrieve his camera, and he finds the body of the camera in a crate in one side of the attic. And then the lens of the camera had been removed and placed on the other side of the attic. He comes down with his camera, and you can tell that what he's just discovered is really shaking him up. And the other investigators are also very shaken up. And whatever they planned to do that night, whether it was finishing the interview with Jackie or whatever, has now gone out the window. They're ready to leave. Jackie is pleading with them to stay. Al is freaked out. No one knows what's happening. And the investigators are like, "Yep. Yeah. Or good. We'll be back soon. We'll be back soon, I promise." But really, they're just like, "Let's get out of here." And they bolt. After they leave, Al sticks around for a little bit longer but ultimately has to go back, cause he has to work early the next day. And so Jackie is left all alone with the kids. She is totally freaked out. She feels like the investigators had upset the entity in the house. And so she's pretty much on edge for something bad to happen. And sure enough, it does. So that night, Jackie is laying on the sofa. She's in full crisis mode. She has no idea what's going on in her house. Watching the investigators who were supposed to be investigating this stuff be obviously spooked and leave really unsettled her. She felt like she didn't have any support from Al. She just felt like the whole situation had just completely fallen apart. And she's so scared for her kids. And she's laying on the sofa, and at some point, she must have passed out. And then she wakes up suddenly, and she looks at the foot of her sofa, and she believes she sees what appears to be the figure of an old man standing there, looking at her kids. She screams. It vanishes. she grabs her kids and she runs out of the house. The first people she calls is the investigators because, again, she's worried about telling the police in fear that they would think it was her being crazy and have her kids taken from her. But she calls the investigators and they don't pick up. But she leaves a voicemail, and on the voicemail, she's completely desperate. She's like, "Please come back. I am out of the house. I can't go back in. I don't know what to do. Like, I can't go back in. Please help me." And one of the photographers who was there heard the voicemail and decides, "You know what? We gotta go back in. It's super late at night." They find Jackie outside of her property in pajamas with her kids. She's totally freaked out. They bring her inside and the house is totally calm. There's no sign of anything going on. And so they're kind of walking around the house. No one goes in the attic, but they're just walking around and it's silent. It's calm. And after a little bit of time, maybe because it was so calm in the house, they decide, you know what? Just because, let's go back up into the attic and just, for sanity, let's just take some pictures and video and see what's up there. So two of the investigators go up into the attic. One has a flashlight and a camera, and then the other just has his camera. And, so they go up there, and Jackie and the third investigator are kind of anxiously standing at the foot of the attic, looking up. And the guys who are up in the attic walking around, they're reporting down to them, "We don't see anything. We don't hear anything. It's quiet up here." But, like, the tension is building, right? And they stop at some point, the two in the attic, and it's just like silence. And all of them reported hearing a snap, and then another snap, and then a third snap, and then silence. And Jackie begins having this overwhelming sense of dread. The guys in the attic are trying to stay calm. They're like, kind of trying to talk. Oh, that could have been the roof. Oh, it could have been this. But the investigator who's down below with Jackie, and Jackie herself, they start kind of panicking. They're like, "Hey, come on, come back down. Let's not risk it. Something's about to happen. Come back down." So, as they're making their way back over to the exit of the attic, and it's totally pitch black up there, minus whatever light source they had, all of a sudden, one of the investigators just gets yanked backwards into the attic. And it was actually the guy holding the flashlight. And so they hear like a tumbling of the flashlight, a tumbling of the camera, and silence from this other investigator. The other investigator who's up in the attic with him, that was not yanked back. He turns around and the guy's gone. And that guy who has not been yanked, suddenly all he has is this camera. The other guy had the flashlight. So he instinctively starts clicking pictures with his camera to use the flash. Jackie and the guy on the ground, they're screaming, "What's going on? What's going on?" And he's just clicking pictures, not looking in the viewfinder, just flashing. And he sees one of the investigator has been hoisted up into the rafters of the attic and he's been tied to a post. And they have a picture of it. And so they run over. The investigator who's up there with him, he runs over, he undies him, pulls him down. And that guy's, totally freaked out. He doesn't know how he got up there. They collect their stuff and they practically fall out of the attic. And it's just pure mayhem because the guy he's freaked out, he's ashen-faced. He's got these marks on his neck like something was holding onto his neck. And they run out of the house, never to go back in. Jackie says that she's not experienced anything paranormal since this instance and swears that this was not a hoax. That, in fact, this was one of the lowest points of her life, and it made her look like an incompetent mother, and it makes her look crazy. And a lot of people still think she's crazy. And for her, this was just a traumatic experience that she has no explanation for. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. If there's a better explanation than ghosts, let me know in the comments. And, please be sure to like and subscribe if you've not already. Also, you can check me out on Instagram. My handle's JohnBallen416. And then on TikTok, it's MrBallen as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Talk to you next week. Where is it? I clearly... I heard the door open. I heard the bells. I heard the paw. I heard the footsteps. I saw the door open. I see the thing walk in. I watched it walk down the aisle. I watched it bend over. It's in the room. Where is it? And this is night 1. There's 2 more nights of this, and it gets worse. When I was 16 years old, I was an avid snowboarder. Starting from the time I was like 12 years old, I used to always go snowboarding with the same 2 guys, my 2 very close friends, Wolf and Nick. Every winter, me, Nick, and Wolf would go up to Nick's family's cabin that was up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, just snowboard, and it was great. Every time we went up to this cabin in New Hampshire, it would be me, Wolf, Nick, and then Nick's mom and dad. Unexpectedly, leading into my 16-year-old winter, Nick's father passed away. We were actually planning on going on a trip to the mountains that winter, and I remember speaking to Wolf and being like, I don't even like. I don't know if it's even appropriate to ask about this trip, because we knew that Nick was very close to his father. And not to mention, like, every time we went on this particular, trip up to the mountains, Nick's dad was always with us. And it just seemed like, how can we possibly now go on the snowboarding trip? Not only is it a low priority item, but just the dynamic is all different now. Nick called us and was like, hey, so we are still gonna do the snowboarding trip to the cabin in New Hampshire. And so, Wolf and I, we spoke and were like, let's just go with it. I mean, maybe it's like... maybe they want to do something that is that. Maybe it's a fond memory of their father, their husband. And so, we agreed to go. So he passes away maybe a few months before we end up going up to the mountains. And so the grief was still definitely there. But also just, again, that the dynamic was very... It was like the elephant in the room, right? Like, as we're driving up, we drove in the same car, me, Wolf, Nick, and then Nick's mom was driving. It was so apparent that Nick's dad was missing, cause he was always in the car with us when we drove up. Anyhow, so we make the trip up to New Hampshire, and we're planning to be up there for 3 days. So, the house itself wasn't really a cabin. It was a house. It was a small house. It was on a mountain. And if you think about the way a mountain works, it's a slope. And so in order to have a house level on a mountain, a portion of it needs to be on stilts, right? The portion that's kind of hanging off the mountain, and then the other part of the house is kind of like embedded in the mountain itself. And when you drive up to the house, there's a wraparound porch that goes around the house. The majority of it is on the stilted section of the house, right? So if you're on the wraparound porch, your footsteps are gonna echo. Like, you can hear those footsteps cause you're above the ground. When you step into the house, you open a door. It actually opens inwardly. There were sleigh bells that were on the door, on the inside of the door. So anytime you open the door, you hear those sleigh bells ringing. And as soon as you step foot into the house, if you took one step into the house, right. So you step on the wraparound porch, you open the door, sleigh bells ring when you step into the house. Your right foot would be in the kitchen, you'd be standing on linoleum, and your left foot would be in shag carpet, which is like the dining room. And that's the way the house is laid out. As soon as you walk in, kitchen on your right, dining room on your left. And if you keep walking, you're gonna enter into this living room. And if you turned around in the living room and looked up, you would see a loft, second floor. If you walk into the house again, your right foot's in the kitchen, your left foot's in the dining room, and you walked as if you're going into that living space. But stopped about halfway across the house, you could look to your right and there'd be one hallway. There's only one hallway. It's a small house. And this hallway is bringing you, call it, into the mountain. If you think about, again, the layout of the house, you have a portion of the house that's sitting in the mountain and a portion of the house that's on stilts. Well, this hallway leads into the section of the house that's in the mountain. And if you go down this hallway and it turns left, it's a short little hallway. It brings you to one room. Then that room is where me, Nick, and Wolf would stay every time we went snowboarding at this mountain. That room, if you go into it, it's a corner-fed room. You open the door and immediately to your right is a bunk bed. I would always sleep on the bottom bunk and Wolf would sleep on the top bunk. Our feet would be closest to the door. In the center of the room with the remaining space, cause this is not a big room, there was like a queen-size bed. It was like a slightly larger bed that sat basically in all of the free space that was left over in the room. It was sitting right in the middle of the room, and that's where Nick would sleep. So basically, the room was completely packed with 3 places to sleep and really not much else. There was a very small space between the queen-size bed and the bunk beds. You could walk between those two, but that was about it. So that layout is very important, and you'll see why. We snowboard for the day, we come back to the cabin, and me, Nick, and Wolf decide we're gonna crash super early and get up early and have a full day of riding ahead of us, cause we rabid snowboarders. So we go to our room, the one that's kind of You go down that hallway and you get to the room I just described. We plan on going to bed early, but we were excited, and so we stayed up gaming for a bit. And then maybe around, like, 11 or 12 o'clock at night, Nick, who again is in the queen-size bed, and Wolf, who's in the top bunk, they ultimately fall asleep. I was still awake. And what struck me, had always struck me whenever I slept in this room, is when you turn off all the electronics and you're just laying in bed in this house. In particular, for this room, it is pitch black. There's no windows. You're in the segment of the house that's, in the mountain. It is truly pitch black. Not to mention the house itself, there weren't really any neighbors nearby. Cause this house, Nick's family had purchased it a while ago when this used to be an active ski resort, the mountain itself that it was on in, but it wasn't anymore. And most people that were living there had left and sold their property, but a few people had decided to stay. And so Nick's family was one of them. So they had this cabin on an abandoned ski resort. There was virtually no street, there's virtually no neighbors. And so at night, when you're laying in this room like I was this night, you're really struck by just how dark and quiet it is. I mean, basically no white noise. I mean, silence and pitch black. And so, I'm laying there. And one other detail that needs to be brought up before we get into what actually happens, so, Nick had 2 much older brothers. They were in their 30s and were 16 years old. And we were expecting one of them, we didn't know which to swing by the house at some point over the next few days. That's what Nick's mom had said. Nick had kind of reiterated it. And I think that Wolf and I understood that, now that Nick's father was gone, that they were just trying to find a way to fill the void that was left from the father passing. And so we were expecting over the course of that weekend for someone, one of the 2 brothers, to come to this house and stay with us for a night or whatever. It was very vocal about it. I had never met either of these 2 brothers. I knew they existed, but I had never met them before. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I know that probably one of them is going to show up at some point, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, whenever it is. Oh, man, it's giving me goosebumps just thinking about this. So at night, as I'm laying in bed, I'm thinking about how dark and quiet it is. I remember the only light in the room was the digital clock, the little Reed digital clock, and it was like a beacon in the light. And that doesn't emit much light, but when it's pure darkness, it does. And I just could not fall asleep. I remember I got to a place where I started counting how many hours of sleep I might get if I fell asleep right then and there, which is never a good sign. That means you're not close to sleeping if you're like, okay, if I fell asleep now, I'll get 3 hours and 22 minutes of sleep, right? Like, that's where I was at mentally. At some point, I think it was around 3 in the morning, I remember looking at the clock and thinking, wow, it's gotten so late and I'm still awake. I hear footsteps on the wraparound porch. In a situation where, as I'm telling it, you're gonna think, How did you not raise, a red flag immediately? In real time and real life, your brain goes to great measures to convince you that everything is okay. It really takes an enormous amount of anomalies to stack up for your brain to say something's wrong. And so that's what happened in this first night. I hear footsteps on the wraparound porch, chips on the wraparound porch, and I immediately assume, even though we're talking it's like 3 in the morning, I just assume that it's got to be one of Nick's brothers arriving to be a part of this weekend getaway. So I really actually didn't think anything of it. I actually just thought, well, when he comes in the house, if he happens to come in here to check on us, I'll just pretend to be asleep in case, he were to see that I was awake. I don't want to have a conversation with him. Number 1, it's 3 in the morning. Number 2, I don't know the guy. I'm just gonna pretend to be asleep. So that's all I'm thinking about. Not worried, not scared, not anything. Footsteps on the wraparound porch. And then the door opens, and I can hear the sleigh bells that are on the door itself. I can hear those chimes. The door opens again. No part of me is concerned about this. I'm thinking it's a little bit weird that they're arriving at 3 in the morning. But we knew that his brothers, had these weird work schedules where they might show up in the middle of the night. So it was whatever it was. Sleigh bells ring. And then I hear what sounds like a kitchen pot, fall and hit the linoleum floor in the kitchen. I remember just the sound stood out to me. It just seemed like this person's kind of making a bit of a commotion in the middle of the night here, and the door didn't shut. And I noticed that. I figured they were maybe bringing their stuff in, right? They're offloading some stuff. They're leaving the door open. Oh, this is. Just thinking about this is really making me feel uncomfortable. So, I hear the footsteps in the wraparound porch, the door opens, I can hear the sleigh bells, a pot falls and it hits the linoleum floor. The footsteps that I could hear on the wraparound porch, because it's on stilts, right? Like the porch is hovering over the ground. You can hear those footsteps. Well, when these footsteps continued into the house, where you're on a concrete slab and there should be no sound. Like, I shouldn't hear echoing footsteps. It sounded like it was on the wraparound porch still, but the noise was getting closer to me. So, it was like the footsteps sounded totally natural out on the wraparound porch, but once they were in the house, it didn't really make any sense that I could hear them it was as if the footsteps were standing on something that was suspended off the ground. But it wasn't. You're in the house on a concrete slab. And so, I hear these footsteps. The door hasn't shut. The front door is wide open. We're in the middle of winter here. We're in the middle of nowhere, too. And I'm thinking about that, but I'm still thinking. It's got to be Nick's brother, one of Nick's brothers. The footsteps continue through the house, and they stop about halfway through the house. If you open that door and walk halfway through the house, and then the footsteps began to walk down the hallway towards our room. So they come down the hall and they get right outside the door, which is shut. The door to our room is shut, and I'm sitting there. Again, my feet are closest to the door. It's pitch black in the room minus the, digital clock. And I'm thinking, why didn't they shut the front door? Of all the weird things that have happened, the fact that I'm hearing footsteps as if they're on the wraparound porch, but they're getting louder and moving through the house, the thing that really just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up was, why didn't they shut the front door? That just seems like such a bad idea. There's animals out there. There's a host of things out there. Like, why aren't you shut? And not to mention, it's freezing outside. There's a space between the bunk bed, the bottom bunk that I'm on, and the top bunk. There's a space that I can see clear as day. Whoever walks in the room, I'm gonna see them when they walk past the foot of the bed. But because of the top bunk, my view is actually obscured and I wouldn't be able to make out someone's face, for example. I could really only see their, middle section. And so when the door opens and the shadow figure walks into the room, which by the way, I'm in a pitch black room and I clearly make out a black silhouette, This thing walks into the room and it's obscure, so I wouldn't have been able to see it. Its head or upper body anyways, but its hips are so high that I can't even really see those. Those are at the level that I would expect someone's upper body or head to be at. Meaning, this figure that's walked in, its legs are extremely long. And so if it was proportionally the size of a human, you're talking about maybe a 10-foot tall person. But we're in a space that obviously is not a 10-foot high ceiling. And so this thing walks in, and as soon as I see it, I make out that black silhouette. Even though it's pitch black in the room, I clearly see this silhouette that is unnaturally tall, combined with all the things that I've just thought about. Mainly, the door's still open. They made kind of a commotion. I can hear these weird footsteps. I instantly was frozen with terror. Frozen. Petrified. Well, one, I'm like, it's not Nick's brother. And even if we're not talking about paranormal here, this is such a bad situation. Even if that's just some dude who's coming to the house, that's a really bad situation. So, no matter what, this is a really bad situation. But what I'm looking at doesn't make sense. It's an unnaturally tall person. They've left the door open, and I hear their footsteps all over the house. And it walks in past the foot of the bed. And I'm laying there, and I can't see higher than its waist, cause it's obscured by the top bunk. And this thing makes this, like, facing movement, like a military facing movement, and begins to walk down the aisle between the queen-sized bed in the middle of the room and the bunk bed where I am. And it's walking down right next to me, and I'm literally sitting there unable to move. And I remember thinking, I can't do anything. I'm truly frozen with terror. And all I remember thinking is, whatever happens, just don't bend down and look at me. That will ruin my life. If this thing so much as looks at me, that's it. I'm done. So, walks down the aisle, it's right next to me. I can't. I'm literally frozen. And it does another quick movement, but it's facing away from me now, facing towards Nick in the center of the room. And it bows onto, and then down through, Nick's bed and disappears. In a movie, as soon as the ghost disappears into the floor, whoever's hiding would make a run for it. In real life, there's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as people disappearing into the ground. So I'm expecting this thing to just get back up again. I couldn't understand that. It was very vocal about it. What? Did it disappear into the bed? That's not possible. Where is it? I heard the door open. I heard the bells. I heard the paw. I heard the footsteps. I saw the door open. I see the thing walk in. I watched it walk down the aisle. I watched it bend over. It's in the room. Where is it? And for hours, all night, I laid there absolutely petrified, expecting this thing to come back up and just look at me. That was, like, my biggest fear is whatever this thing was, I did not want to be. Well, I did not want it to look at me. So that was the worst. I'm laying there frozen. I can only move my eyes all night. Finally, I hear Nick's mom out in the living room making coffee. This was probably like 5, 6 in the morning. And it was like the first time that I'm like, okay, I'm safe now. Even if it's in the room, I'm safe to just go because I can hear someone out there and it's sent. I can hear her speaking. I knew it was her. And so I go right out there. And now, you gotta understand that even though this was a horrible situation that I still can't really explain, I know that she has just lost her husband. And so the idea of approaching the subject, which effectively is gonna turn into ghosts, right? I've never had a paranormal experience before this. I've never had a paranormal experience since, right? Like, I'm more or less a skeptic. And I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna start talking about ghosts to the woman who's recently bereaved. It just felt really inappropriate. And So I was really struggling with how I wanted to communicate what happened. And so I went to the table. She got me a cup of coffee. And she's kind, and we know each other well, she knows me well. And she definitely picked up that something was wrong, but didn't really ask anything yet. She was just kind of puzzling, like kind of sizing me up a little bit. And the only thing I could think to do was to just ask, hey, did either of your two sons, your Nick's older brothers, did they stop by at any point last night? Did they stop by? And she's like, no. Then I'm sitting there like, okay. And I'm just like, I must have had a reaction that was obvious to her. And she just goes, I heard my husband here last night too. And that made it a lot worse. Because on the one hand, you have a situation where she is confirming something that part of me hopes is a bad dream. Number two, she's now saying it's her husband. And so I intuitively assumed that she has somehow figured out what I'm stressed about that probably isn't real. And because she's grieving, she's created a story where her husband is now in the house, looking over us, I really believed that she didn't hear anything, that she just somehow understood that I had this weird feeling, and she turned it into my husband's in the house. And I just couldn't ask any more questions at that point. I felt like I had set her up for this awkward exchange. I felt really bad that was the discussion we were having. I also thought if that's true, I don't want to have this conversation. I really was just dumbfounded on what to do in this situation. And this is night one. There's 2 more nights of this, and it gets worse. So Nick and Wolf eventually come out of the bedroom, and they come to the dining room. And the same way I felt reserved talking to Nick's mom about what happened, I had the same feelings about Nick, cause it was his father. And I also just felt like that would be inappropriate. But Wolf, he's not a family member, and he's my buddy. And I kind of pulled him aside and I kind of told him what was going on as best as I could. But I kept it, kind of generic. I was like, I could have sworn I heard someone in the house last night. I could have sworn. And he's like, yeah, you're probably dreaming. That's what this is. And I was like, no. I wasn't, but I can't make sense of it. And I was like, can you just do me a favor? And at this point, Nick actually overheard the conversation. And I very much cut ties with what I was talking about. I was like, yeah, I just thought I heard something last night. It's just me freaking myself out. And I was like, can you guys tonight, when we get back from snowboarding, can I fall asleep ahead of you? That way I'm asleep, you guys can just fall asleep after I do. And then I'll sleep through the night. No big deal. And they're like, all right, yeah, weirdo, whatever on it. So I'm like, all right, my big plan is I'm just gonna go to bed really, really early cause I didn't sleep the night before. So I'm thinking, oh, I'll fall asleep right away. So we go out, we snowboard for the day. My mind is off of what happened and frankly, I'm starting to convince myself that had to have been, sleep paralysis. Even though I've never had that before, I was Googling some stuff in sleep paralysis. Maybe it was just a really intense dream. Oh, I would just look at it. There has to be something. This is too weird. It has to be something explainable. Turns out it wasn't. We get back from snowboarding and I am immediately going to bed. Pretty much immediately. It was maybe 6 o'clock. I was like, I'm going to bed. And I get in bed, and all I'm thinking about is what happened the night before. And I can't fall asleep. Eventually, Nick and Wolf, they come in the room and they're trying their best to stay awake so that I can fall asleep. But it's getting later and later and I can't fall asleep. And now I'm back to that okay, if I fall asleep now, I get 6 hours of sleep now. And they finally just said, hey, man, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. So they both fall asleep in time. I'm awake, And I was so upset with myself, like, you screwed yourself. Why didn't you just fall asleep, you dummy? And I remember the only thing that I did that really made this real looking back at it, is I put a knife, like a kitchen knife or something, in the springs above me. So I'm in the bottom bunk, like basically right under the top bunk. I put a knife in there, and I'm laying in bed and I'm constantly looking over at the digital clock. And it was probably around 3:00 a.m. It was late enough that it was like, okay, this is about the time that happened last night. And my heart just sunk when I heard those footsteps on the wraparound porch again. They sounded the same as they did the night before. I was like, that has to be one of Nick's brother. But the door opens. I hear the sleigh bells. I hear the freaking pot fall on the ground. It was like deja vu, the exact same thing is happening. And these footsteps start walking through the house. And again, referencing how movies would portray this, you know? The person who's me in the movie is like, okay, I'm gonna get this knife, and I'm gonna position myself over here because I know what's gonna happen. I'm gonna protect myself. In real life, I'm like, this thing's gonna be in my room potentially. It happened last night. It's apparently happening again. Please, for the love of God, don't bow into me the way it bowed into the floor the night before. Don't look at me. It will ruin my life. If some entity just engages with me, just looks at me, that will ruin my life. This thing walks down the hall, and I hear those footsteps coming down the hall. And just pretend for a second, forget the paranormal aspect, pretend it's the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, and you, a stranger is walking around your house. That alone is horrifying. The footsteps come right outside the door, and I'm looking at the knife that's right underneath the bed, and I'm petrified. I cannot move. I'm drenched in sweat just from the few seconds that it's taken this thing to go from the door to the front of my bedroom. 'Cause I know what's happening again. It's happening again. I'm not crazy. It's just happening again. What the F is this? And I'm petrified. I can't reach. I'm so worried about making any noise that would alert this thing that I'm here, that I'm here. I can only move my eyes. And I remember even thinking that I shouldn't move my eyes too quickly, 'cause it might hear that. Like, this is a primal level of fear. The door opens. It walks into the room, goes right past up to my bed, and I'm again petrified. And it walks down after making its facing movement. It walks down the aisle between me and Nick. And I remember what happened the night before, where it folded into Nick and disappeared. And I'm just thinking to myself, please don't turn and bow into me. Please, whatever happens, just don't do that. So it turns away from me and does the same thing it did the night before, folds onto Nick and disappears into the ground. But again, even though in the movies this would be the same thing happening, you know, night 2, it's the same routine. It's like, oh, the ghost is in the floor now. I can go alert the authorities. 'Cause now it's safe in real life. I'm like, where did it go? I know this happened last night, but it still doesn't make any sense. It's in the room. It has to be. This is a real thing. It came in the room. It's somewhere. Is it under my bed? Where is it? All night I lay there. This is the second night that I've not slept. When I heard Nick's mom out in the other room, it was like such a relief. Because I didn't give a crap at this point about being polite. I wasn't gonna try to, distance myself from the conversation around ghosts. I was gonna go out there and be like, what's wrong with this house? And so I hear her, and I go right out to the living room, and I tell her everything in as acute detail as I possibly can. And as I'm telling her this, her reaction didn't line up. Her reaction was not surprise, terror, confusion. It was empathy. She felt bad for me. It was sympathy. You don't understand. Like I'm listening, but you just don't understand what's happening. And I'm telling her all that. I mean, every detail I can possibly muster. And at the end of it, or towards the end, if she just kind of stops me, she's like, John, I told you yesterday. And again, I I heard it last night. That's just my husband. I heard him last night too. You got nothing to worry about it. And I was like, no, that cannot be. That cannot be what it is. And she was like, I heard him open the door. I heard the pot fall. I heard him walk through the house. I'm assuming he went into Nick's room again with you guys. And I'm like, what is happening? So, totally now just beside myself. I remember I was crying actually like during this conversation. I'm just crying. Not even like tears of sadness as much as just, like, what's happening. Like, I needed my mom. Like I felt so helpless. And no offense to Nick's mom, but I just felt like I was with a lunatic. How? Ugh. But like at the same time, she's recalling the exact same things as me. How? How do I put that together? I remember thinking, I need to leave. I need to get out of here. I can't be here anymore. But then I thought about, like, how am I going to make this happen? Nick's mom and Wolf and Nick, they're not leaving today. And it was pretty clear that Nick's mom liked the fact that she, heard her husband walking around the cabin. She's not trying to leave. There's one more night that we're here and I would have to tell my parents to drive. My mom or my dad to drive to New Hampshire and come get me because I'm seeing ghosts. Like, this is a trip that I love. I look forward to this trip every year. It wouldn't have made any sense, and they would have been like, what's wrong with you? And I, honestly, was not prepared to have those conversations with my mom and dad. I was not prepared to be like, let me tell you about the ghost I saw over the past 2 days. And so I was just kind of resigned and decided to stay. In retrospect, I think I should have called my parents and been like, that's what parents are for, like, get the hell up here, Rents. Doesn't matter why, come get me. But it was such a confusing moment that I had no blueprint for how to handle, so I just stayed. Nick and Wolf finally get up, and I remember I made that decision as I'm sitting there thinking about what's happening as Nick's mom is reassuring me, about her husband being in the house. And I make the decision that I'm gonna stay. Nick and Wolf come out of the room and they come over, and Wolf pretty much immediately looks at me to get a gauge on what happened. And you can see it all over my face. I've been crying. And I told them what happened and Nick was always kind of a stoic and he was just unaffected, Wolf, on the other hand, was more inclined to, at a minimum, believe something was happening. He didn't know if it was a ghost or not, but he certainly understood that something's going on. And the fact that Nick's mom, as I'm explaining to Nick and Wolf what's going on, she was, like, reinforcing my argument. Yeah. I heard him I heard the door open. Yeah, I was upstairs. I heard him walk through the house. And Wolf's like, what's going on? And Nick is like, he didn't want to hear it, kind of, though. It probably was uncomfortable. It's about his father. We're ultimately talking about his father. Before we went out snowboarding for the day, cause Nick's mom would Dr. Evison drop us off, she brought us to a local store. Then we bought a coffee table, cause they've been looking to replace the one that was in their house. Basically, when you walk into the house, instead of turning down the hallway towards our room, if you just keep walking into the loft area, at the foot of the stairs was a coffee table where they kept a landline phone. Cause you're in the middle of nowhere and you gotta have some way to call. And they put it right at the foot of the stairs in this little coffee table. It had broken, or it was old, or whatever. I know that they wanted a new one for a long time. We went out and got it. Me, Nick, and Wolf. We go, we snowboard, we come back, we help offload the coffee table into the house. We put it at the foot of the stairs. And that night we go to bed. I was ruthless in trying to keep Wolf and Nick awake. I mean, I wasn't even trying to make jokes out of it. I was like straight up kicking the bunk like kicking Wolf's bunk. Like, literally shaking Nick. I was doing everything in my power to keep them awake, cause I couldn't sleep. I'm terrified. It was like the opposite of how excited you get before Christmas and you can't sleep. It was like the opposite of those feelings, but you still can't sleep. It was like, this is the worst night of my life. And also the nail in the coffin, if you will, is during the day. We found out that neither of Nick's two brothers were going to be making the trip. They weren't going to make it. So no one's going to be at the house. No one should be at the house except for us. And so that night, I'm laying there and after all my attempts to keep Nick and Wolf awake, they fall asleep. Everyone's asleep. The house is pitch black. It's silent. And around 2, 3 in the morning, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. I hear those footsteps on the wraparound porch. The door opens, and I hear the sleigh bells ringing in the door. A pot falls on the ground, and the footsteps walk into the house. And this is the 3rd time that this has happened, so in a way, this was the first time that I was expecting something to happen, for it to walk down the hall, to come in the room, to come next to me, fold into Nick, and then that's it. This is the first time I had a little bit of, call it, security that something was going to happen, and I understood what was going to happen. I didn't understand it, but I expected something to happen. But this was not the case this night. It walked into the house. Everything was the same. It walked into the house, but instead of going down the hallway towards our room, it kept walking into the loft area. And the loft area from where I was laying. My foot's at the door, my head's back here. The wall's straight, if I like, sat up in bed and looked straight. The wall right there lead into the area where this thing was. So I'm talking, but I'm basically. If there wasn't a wall, I'd be looking dead at this thing. And I'm waiting for it to walk through the wall, as crazy as that sounds. I'm just anticipating something coming through the wall. After a long pause of it being in that loft area, I hear it go up the steps, listening to the creak of the steps as it goes up the steps. It makes my skin crawl. It's making me, like, emotional thinking about how terrifying that was. Walks up the stairs, and now it's above me. And if the past two nights are any example, this thing has sunk into the ground 2 nights in a row and disappeared. And so now my fear is it's going to literally come through the ceiling, through the bunk, onto me. The sound stopped when it was upstairs. Got upstairs, and that's where Nick's mom slept. She was upstairs. So I laid in bed, petrified once again. I got my stupid knife sitting in the underside of the bed above me. And hours of waiting for my literal worst nightmare to come true, as some entity comes through the ceiling and goes into me. Or even just if it was like on the Nick, if it came through the ceiling and diff, out of my peripheres. I'm watching like this beast come through the ceiling and float down and into Nick. Just all these thoughts in my head. They didn't make any sense. They were terrifying, but they were happening. I laid in bed and I couldn't fall asleep. I was now coming up on 3 days without sleep. So at some point that night I did fall asleep, probably just out of sheer exhaustion. At some point in the morning, early morning now, probably like 5 in the morning, I wake up again and I could hear Nick's mom. It didn't sound like she was making coffee. It sounded like something was wrong. I couldn't place it, but it just sounded like there was. She was acting emotional somehow. I couldn't tell if she was crying or not. But now it's like it's the morning. It's my last day. I'm leaving today. I'm out. And as soon as I walk out of the hallway and I look to the left into the dining room where I expect to see Nick's mom. And she's not there. And she's actually over at the foot of the stairs in the loft, kind of living room area, next to this new coffee table we had just put in. And she's standing over this coffee table at the foot of the stairs where the entity had been the night before the one deviation from the other 2 nights. And she's crying. Come here. She points to the coffee table, and she's down on her knees looking at the table. And now I can tell she's probably crying tears of joy because scratched into the coffee table were the words, "I love you." I was like, I'm done. That ended my friendships with certainly Nick. Wolf to a lesser degree, but I never, there. I stopped snowboarding. I didn't go back to that cabin, even though I know Wolf did the next year. The theories about what happened, Nick's mom, it's possible she could have created a narrative made about her husband, and then she could have just as easily scratched that into the table. The I love you, that could have been her. I mean, it's also possible that she had sleep paralysis and I had sleep paralysis and somehow we synchronized at the same vision, and she scratched in the table. Or, to be honest, what I believe that was a ghost, and that it interacted with the physical world. And it did walk around the house. It did carve I love you into that table. And well, that's the only time in my entire life that I've had anything happen like that. I don't have any other paranormal stories before or after. That's it. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm gonna continue to do long versions of my ghost stories and scary stories that I find, that I usually put, that I've been posting on TikTok. Okay. I'm gonna do long versions of those, on this YouTube channel. That's gonna be the new direction for this channel. If you have a great ghost story, please DM me on Instagram. My handle is JohnBallen416. JOHNBALLEN for 16. Send me your story on Instagram. You can also hit me up on TikTok. That's Mr. Ballen. And that's gonna do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed.